Imagine you are standing in a dense, mist-covered forest in Hawaii back in the late 80s. The air is thick with the scent of tropical flowers, but there is something missing. The usual chaotic symphony of birdsong is gone, replaced by a haunting, solitary whistle. Somewhere in the canopy, the very last Kauai'oa'oa is singing his heart out. He is calling for a mate that no longer exists, singing a duet where no one ever joins in. He doesn't know he is the last of his kind. He doesn't know that researchers are watching him through a lens, capturing the very last visual evidence of a lineage that thrived for millions of years. Today, we are opening a digital time capsule. We are looking at the most incredible and heartbreaking last photos of extinct birds. Images that captured the final moments of species before they vanished into the permanent silence of history. These aren't just pictures, they are warnings, legacies, and echoes of a world that was once much louder and more colorful than it is today. Stick with me until the end, because the very last bird we discussed disappeared so recently that many of you might remember the headlines, and the photo captured of it is so high definition it feels like you could reach out and touch a ghost. Let's get right into these tragic marvels of nature. The first bird on our list is perhaps the most famous example of how quickly a species can go from billions to zero, a passenger pigeon. If you lived in America in the mid-1800s, you wouldn't have believed this bird could ever go extinct. They were the most numerous birds on the planet. When a flock of passenger pigeons flew over, it was described as a biological eclipse. The sky would turn black for hours, even days, as millions of birds moved in a single, massive wave. The sound of their wings was like a coming storm. Yet, by the early 20th century, they were gone. The last photo we have is of a bird named Martha. She lived at the Cincinnati Zoo and became a global celebrity in her final years because the world finally realized she was the end of the line. In her last photographs, you see a bird that looks remarkably like a common mourning dove, but with a more elegant, elongated tail and a piercing, intelligent eye. Martha passed away in 1914, and with her, an entire phenomenon of the natural world vanished. Looking at that grainy, black and white photo of her sitting alone on a wooden perch is a powerful reminder that no matter how abundant a species seems, it is never invincible. It is a snapshot of solitary dignity at the end of a cosmic era. Next, we move to the rugged, icy cliffs of the North Atlantic to talk about the great auk. Now, photography was just being invented when the great auk was in its final days. For those who don't know, the great auk was the Northern Hemisphere's version of a penguin. Though they weren't actually related, they were giant flightless auks that stood nearly 3 feet tall. They were masters of the sea, diving deep into the frigid Atlantic waters to hunt. However, on land, they were slow and trusting. The last known pair was taken on the island of Eldey, off the coast of Iceland, in 1844. While we don't have a digital photo of them alive in the wild, we have the last photo of the last birds ever collected, preserved specimens that were photographed shortly after photography became a viable medium. When you look at the likeness of the great auk, you see a creature built for another world. Their large, grooved beaks and tiny wings tell the story of a bird that chose the ocean over the sky. Seeing their preserved forms in 19th century photographs feels like looking at a creature from a Norse myth. They represent a lost part of the Atlantic's wild soul, a creature that survived the Vikings but couldn't survive the age of industrial collection. The third bird in our gallery takes us to the subtropical forests of the American Southeast, the ivory-billed woodpecker. Known as the Lord God bird because that was the exclamation people made when they saw its massive, 20-inch frame and striking white beak. This bird was the king of the old-growth swamps. For decades, the ivory-billed woodpecker has been the holy grail of birdwatching. The last undisputed photos and film of this bird were taken in 1935 and 1944 in a patch of forest in Louisiana known as the Singer Tract. In these photos, you see the breathtaking scale of the bird as it hitches up a massive ancient tree. It looks prehistoric, with a sharp, regal crest and a gaze that seems to pierce through the swamp mist. Since those photos were taken, there have been countless ghost sightings and grainy videos that people claim are the ivory bill, but none have matched the clarity of those final 1940s images. Those photos serve as a haunting benchmark for what we have lost, the deep, untouched wilderness that these birds required to survive. To look at an ivory bill on film is to look at the very heart of the American wilderness before it was Sumi of lumber and development. Our fourth entry brings us back to the tragic story I mentioned at the beginning, the Kauai'oa'oa. This bird was a small, dark honey-eater with beautiful yellow leg feathers. It was endemic to the island of Kauai in Hawaii. Hawaii is often called the extinction capital of the world for birds, and the o'o is its most heartbreaking symbol. In the 1980s, a researcher named John Sincock managed to take a series of photos and even a video of the last male, but the context makes the photos devastating. He was the only one left. By 1987, he was gone. The audio recorded alongside the last photos is what truly haunts people. It is the male singing his mating song, pausing for the female to respond, but hearing only silence. The photo of this small bird, perched on a branch in a vast, empty forest, represents the loneliness of extinction. It's not just the end of a species, it's the end of a voice. Every time I see that photo, I am reminded that nature's beauty is often much more fragile than we care to admit. Now, let's head to the grasslands of Martha's Vineyard for the fifth bird on our list, the heath hen. The heath hen was a relative of the prairie chicken, and it was once so common in New England that it was considered a poor man's food. By the late 1800s, it had been hunted down to a single population on one island. In the 1920s, a bird named Booming Ben became the last of his kind. We have incredible photos of Booming Ben from around 1930. He is seen performing his traditional mating dance, inflating orange air sacs on his neck, and making a low, booming sound to attract a mate. The photos show a bird full of life and instinct, doing exactly what his ancestors had done for thousands of years, but there was no one to hear him. Booming Ben was last seen in 1932, and the photos of him standing alone in a field of scrub oak are some of the most poignant in the history of ornithology. They capture the final gasp of a unique American bird that was once a staple of the landscape. The sixth photo takes us to the mountains of Mexico, where the imperial woodpecker once lived. This was the largest woodpecker to ever exist on the planet, even larger than the ivory bill. It was nearly 2 feet tall, a magnificent bird with a tall, curving crest. For a long time, there was no visual record of this bird alive, only museum specimens. But in the 1950s, an amateur filmmaker captured a short, 16 mm color film of a female imperial woodpecker climbing a tree in the Sierra Madre. The stills from this film are our last photos of the species. Even though the quality is shaky, you can see the sheer power of the bird. It moves with a heavy, deliberate grace. The imperial woodpecker lived in the high-altitude pine forests, and as those forests were logged, the bird simply vanished. Those brief, flickering frames from the mid-century are all we have left of the largest woodpecker to ever fly. It's a glimpse into a mountain wilderness that has been fundamentally changed by its absence. Finally, we reach the seventh bird, the Spix's macaw. Now, some of you might be confused because you've seen this bird in the movie Rio, or you know that there are some in captivity, but in terms of the wild, the story is much darker. For years, only one single male Spix's macaw remained in the wild in the interior of Brazil. In the late 1990s, photographers captured stunning, high-definition photos of this lone blue bird flying across the dry Caatinga landscape. He was a brilliant, vibrant shade of cyan, looking like a sapphire against the dusty earth. These photos are breathtaking because they show the animal in its true home, doing what it was evolved to do. In 2000, that lone male vanished. While there are intensive efforts to reintroduce the species using captive-bred birds, those photos from the year 2000 represent the last photo of the original, wild-born population. It's a photo of deep blue hope and deep blue sorrow. Seeing a bird that beautiful in such a stark environment makes you realize how much color the world loses every time a species falls off the map. As we look at these images, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the loss. It's a gallery of ghosts. But these photos are doing something important. They are preventing us from forgetting. When we don't have a photo of something, it becomes a myth, a legend, or just a name in a book. But when we have a photo, we see the individual. We see Martha, we see Booming Ben, we see the lone Spix's macaw. We see the curve of the beak, the light in the eye, and the unique pattern of the feathers. We see that these were not just types of animals, but living beings that possessed a will to survive. These photos transform a scientific concept like extinction into a deeply personal narrative. Why does this matter to us today? Because even though these 7 birds are gone, there are hundreds of others currently sitting on the brink, and we are in the process of taking their last photos right now. Birds like the kakapo in New Zealand, The Philippine eagle, or the California condor are species where every individual counts. When you look at the photos of Martha the passenger pigeon, you should think about the birds in your own backyard or the rare species in your country. These images teach us that the transition from common to extinct can happen within a single human lifetime. It happened to the heath hen. It happened to the Carolina parakeet, and it happened to the great auk. Think about the sound of these birds. One of the things that photos can't capture, but that we can only imagine through them, is the acoustic loss to our planet. The boom of the heath hen, the duet of the oo, the deafening thunder of the passenger pigeon's wings. When we lose a bird, we lose a specific frequency of life. We are left with a quieter, less vibrant world. These photos are the visual evidence of that silence. They allow us to reconstruct a memory of what the world used to be like. There is also a fascinating story about the people behind the cameras. The photographers who took these last pictures often knew they were witnessing history. John Sincock, who filmed the Kauai Oo, spent years in the muddy, rain-soaked swamps of Hawaii because he knew that if he didn't document these birds, no one would ever know they existed. These photographers are like the biographers of the lost. They gave us the gift of sight for creatures we can never see with our own eyes. Their dedication is why we have this connection to the past. It's also worth considering how technology has changed our relationship with extinction. In the 1840s, it took a massive, heavy camera and a chemical plate to capture the great auk. Today, anyone with a smartphone can contribute to citizen science. We have apps where birdwatchers upload photos in real time. This means that for modern species, we will have thousands of high-quality images. But does that make the loss any less? In some ways, it makes it more painful. The more clearly we can see what we are losing, the harder it is to ignore our responsibility. The high-definition photos of the Spix's macaw are so much more real to us than the grainy sketches of the dodo. Speaking of the dodo, it's the one bird everyone thinks of when they hear the word extinct. But since the dodo vanished in the 1600s, we have no photos of it. We only have skeletons and stylized paintings. This is why the birds on our list today are so special. They lived in the age of the lens. They are the first generations to be immortalized digitally while their physical forms disappeared. They bridge the gap between ancient history and the modern world. They are the living fossils of the photographic era. The story of the Bachman's warbler is another one that deserves a mention. It was a tiny, yellow-breasted songbird that lived in the canebrakes of the American South. The last clear photo of a Bachman's warbler was taken in the 1950s. It shows a tiny, delicate bird that looks almost like a speck of sunlight. It was so small and so specialized to a specific type of habitat that once the canebrakes were cleared, it had nowhere to go. Photos of the Bachman's warbler are so rare that each one is studied by experts with intense scrutiny, looking for clues about its behavior or its nesting habits. These photos are not just art, they are data. They are the only way we can still study these animals in their natural state. One of the most powerful things about these last photos is how they challenge our sense of time. When you look at a photo from 1914 or 1932, it doesn't feel that long ago. It's within the reach of our grandparents' or great-grandparents' memories. This realization that we lost these incredible beings so recently is a wake-up call. It takes the concept of extinction out of the prehistoric bin and puts it right into our current reality. It makes us realize that we are currently living through a period of massive biological change. But let's talk about the hope that these photos can provide. Recently, there has been a lot of talk about de-extinction. The idea that we could use DNA from museum specimens to bring some of these birds back. Scientists are looking at Martha's DNA, and they are looking at the skins of the great auk. While this is a controversial topic, it's the last photos that give us the blueprint of what these birds should look like, how they should stand, and how they should move. Without these visual records, we wouldn't even know what we were trying to recreate. The photos are the visual North Star for future conservation and science. Furthermore, these photos have inspired a whole generation of conservationists. Many people who work to save the birds of today started their journey by seeing a photo of a passenger pigeon or a Kauai Oo and feeling a profound sense of never again. These images are powerful emotional tools. They can change hearts and minds in a way that a list of statistics never can. They allow people to fall in love with a bird that they will never meet. Consider the Carolina parakeet, the only parrot species native to the eastern United States. It was a riot of color, bright green with a yellow and orange head. The last one, named Incas, died in the same zoo as Martha only 4 years later. We have photos of Carolina parakeets in captivity, and they are striking. To imagine a flock of these bright, tropical-looking birds flying through a snowy forest in Kentucky or New York seems impossible today, but the photos prove it was real. They prove that our world was once more exotic and diverse than we often imagine. What can we do to ensure that the birds we love today don't end up on a list like this in 50 years? The first step is awareness. Supporting organizations that protect habitat is crucial. Most of the birds we discussed today didn't disappear because of a single event, but because their homes were slowly whittled away. Protecting a forest, a swamp, or a grassland is the best way to keep the last photo from ever being taken. Another way is to become a citizen scientist. Use your camera. Document the birds in your area. Your photos might one day be part of a record that helps scientists understand how a species is doing. We are all part of the documentation of life on Earth. By taking photos of living birds today, we are celebrating their presence and highlighting the importance of their continued existence. The mystery of the lost birds also keeps us searching. Every year, someone goes into the swamps of Louisiana looking for the ivory-billed woodpecker. Every year, people search the forests of Brazil for the Spix's macaw. While some might call it a fool's errand, it's the final photos that fuel that passion. They are the proof that the bird was real, and the hope that somewhere, in a corner of the world we haven't checked yet, it might still be there. The photos keep the dream alive, but even if they are truly gone, these birds still have a voice. They speak to us through these images. They tell us about the beauty of specialization, the power of migration, and the intricate balance of the natural world. They tell us that every species, no matter how small or how common, has a story worth telling. They remind us to look up, to listen, and to appreciate the feathered marvels that still fill our skies. When you see a photo of the passenger pigeon, don't just see an extinct bird, see a miracle of social organization. When you see the great auk, see a marvel of marine adaptation. When you see the Kauai-o-o, see the unique evolution of a volcanic island. These birds were masterpieces of nature, and we were lucky enough to capture a few final glimpses of them before the curtain fell. Let's respect their legacy by being better stewards of the birds we have left. Let's make sure that the colorful, loud, and diverse world we inherited is passed on to the next generation. We don't want to live in a world where the only way to see a bird is through a screen or a museum glass. We want to live in a world where the duet of the honeyeater is answered, where the boom of the prairie chicken echoes across the plains, and where the sky is occasionally darkened by a flock of birds so large it takes your breath away. These 7 stories are just a fraction of the birds we have lost in the last 2 centuries, but they are some of the most visible ones. They are the representatives of all the others who vanished without a photo, without a name, and without a witness. They stand for the thousands of species that are currently struggling. Let their last photos be the spark that helps us save the others. The next time you see a common bird, a robin, a crow, or even a pigeon, take a second to really look at it. Notice the way the light hits its feathers, the way it interacts with its environment, and the complexity of its song. Remember that there was a time when the passenger pigeon was just as common, and people couldn't imagine a world without it. Everything we have is temporary if we don't take care of it. The history of life on Earth is a long tale of emergence and disappearance, but we are the first species to have the ability to document it, to understand it, and to actively try to stop the disappearance part. Our cameras are not just for selfies and vacation shots. They are tools for recording the miracle of life. Use them to honor the birds that are still with us. I hope these photos and stories have moved you as much as they have moved me. Looking back at the last photos is a somber journey, but it's also an inspiring one. It's a journey that connects us to the true scale of our planet's history. It's a reminder that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with these lost legends. Their images remain with us, frozen in time, capturing the final seconds of a sunlight that will never shine on them again. But as long as we keep looking at them, as long as we keep telling their stories, they aren't truly gone. They live on in our awareness, in our science, and in our commitment to the future. Let's make sure that the next chapter of the Earth's story is one of recovery and hope. The birds are waiting for us to act. Keep your eyes on the skies, keep your cameras ready, and never stop marveling at the wild, wonderful world we call home. We can't change the past, but we can definitely protect the future. Let's do it for the ones we lost, and for all the ones who are still singing.